Janet Jackson, and I'm one of the current Oakland County Commissioners. This informational town hall was made at the request from ACT, a Coalition for Transit, who Marie Donigan is the, what is your title of that?
Transit Projects Coordinator.
The Transit Projects Coordinator.
I made that up.
Sounds real good.
We were graced with their presence at one of our recent county commission meetings and asked us to hold these sessions in our communities to kind of help spread the word about the need for and the progress toward a connected regional transit system. My fellow commissioner, David Ullman, is also in the audience. Right here. Hi, David. As well as a lot of other great elected officials that serve our area so proudly. Marie will be giving a presentation very soon, but I'd like to also introduce everyone here to the other elected that came this evening and are supporting this town hall. Right here to my left, I have our current state representative, Jerry Moss. Jerry Moss. I have our county treasurer, Mr. Andy Meisner. In the back of the room, we have our one of our county city council members, Myron Frazier, and then Marie Dowd, who is a former state rep, who carries her work forward on behalf of regional transit in our community. So we won't take too much of your time this evening. We just want you to know the importance of this issue and want to hear your voices, right?
That's right.
Within the content of this program. So Marie, thank you.
Thank you.
Look forward to your presentation.
Hey, my pleasure. So, I'm not going to use the microphone because it's way over there. So this is a pretty fancy setup for me. This is great. I usually have just a projector on a wall in some room somewhere, so this is great. So my name is Marie Donigan. I'm born and raised in Royal Oak. I was a state rep until 2010, representing Royal Oak and Madison Heights, and since then I've been working for the Harriet Tubman Center, and we're Detroit-based community organizers, and one of our projects is called DRIVE. It's Detroit Regional Interfaith Voice for Equity, and our clergy heard from the young people in their congregations that when we were looking at issues that needed their attention, regional transit, better regional transit, was one of their really important issues. So I was doing nothing, I was painting my house. So they hired me and we began advocating in a variety of ways. And we had no problem putting together a 60-member leadership team of civic, political, and business leaders who shared our desire for a better regional transit system in Southeast Michigan. And so we did summits. We had a summit at Ford Field, which was huge, which brought a lot, about 400 people. We did listening sessions around the region, and now we've been invited to work with an organization called ACT, which is a coalition for transit, and we'll get around to that in a minute. So when we talk about regional transit, what we're really talking about is 4 counties. Macomb, Oakland, Wayne, and Washtenaw counties, including the city of Detroit, a transit system to connect the 4 counties in a seamless, reliable, connected kind of way. Tonight we're going to talk about who needs transit, who needs better transit, why it's important that we have better transit, what are the problems that are being caused by the fact that we don't have a good and connected transit system, and what are the barriers and the limitations that we've been fighting for the last 50 or so years since we sold our last streetcar to Mexico City in 1956 and sold our last commuter train to New Jersey. And I think they're still using our vehicles. So recent surveys have indicated that the majority of the people in the region, a good majority of the people in the region, believe that we need a better regional transit system. But they think that they're not really sure why exactly. They hear some things. Most people don't use it, so they don't really know exactly what the problems are, but they know there are problems. But they also think that our system is comparable or somewhat comparable to transit systems in other regions. So we're out here doing these talks to really show them that that's just not the case. We need to get everybody on the same page. So we really in Metro Detroit need to do a lot of things, and we've had a lot of problems over the last several years, and one of them is to grow and prosper. But in order to do that, people have to get jobs and be able to get to their jobs. But when we have jobs and everybody's employed, we have a robust economy, which we want, and communities that grow and prosper invest in their future, and their future, as we were told by our young people in our congregations, is a future where we invest in regional transit. But it's really hard to do all of that to grow and prosper in this region because we have one of the worst, if not the worst, regional transit system in the country, because it simply is not connected. Not connected from county to county, from community to community. In some ways, in some counties or in communities, you can't even get around your own community to get where you need to go. So it really is about jobs. This is Renardi's in Lincoln Park, and he relies on transit all the time. But it's not just employees that need good transit. Employers also want good and connected regional transit. In the cities, small and large companies in the cities and in the suburbs, they need reliable transit so they can have a reliable and stable workforce. If you've been around here long enough, you know that our jobs shifted from Detroit to the suburbs. So the jobs shifted, but our transit system did not shift. So now we have a situation where the majority of the jobs are in the suburbs. Even though you hear about jobs being moved downtown, the majority of the jobs will stay in the suburbs. Think about all of our shopping malls and little industrial parks, all of our hospitals. We have a lot of hospitals that employ a lot of people. We have nursing homes, we have home health care, all the restaurants. I look at all the restaurants on 16 Mile in Troy alone, there's a lot of them, and all of the hotels that people work at. So what we have now is a situation where 92% of the jobs in the region cannot be reached within 1 hour if you have to rely on public transportation, which is a lot of time that you have to spend waiting for a bus, and often you have to transfer just to do that. 78% of the jobs in the region cannot be reached at all if you have to rely on public transportation. So now we have a situation where most, if not all, jobs in this region are underserved or completely unserved by public transportation. So there is something to being the last to do anything, is that you get to collect data from all the other regions that have built modern public transportation systems. So we know that is a good investment. Public transit is a good investment. For every dollar you spend on a public transportation system, on a high quality system that's connected, frequent, reliable, and safe, you get at least $4 in return investment or economic benefit in the forms of building, new building, money in your pocket. People have money in their pocket. They spend money at all those restaurants and hotels. So we know that it's really a great investment. Homes near transit, if you live like along Woodward like I do, if you're near transit, your homes perform 42% better minimum if you're within a mile of a public transit system. So those of you who live along Woodward, Gratiot, or Michigan Avenue at the moment are sitting pretty if we build this transit system that we're going to be talking about here. So who else needs public transit? Well, this is a gentleman who's a little bit older, but he's now ready to go out to pasture and be sitting in an old folks home somewhere. This man wants to be engaged in life. But we all know that should we live long enough, we're all going to outlive our ability to drive by 7 to 10 years. And if that's the case, here in Southeast Michigan, you're going to be stuck in your house and have nowhere to go. Reliable public transit really means independence. It equals independence. I have this conversation all the time. People say, well, they can get a ride from a friend. When you get a ride from a friend, you're not leading an independent life, and I think everybody wants that. 83% of the people that were surveyed say they rely on regional transit to have easy access to an independent life, and that's of course your neighbor, your grandma, your church elder, your grandpa who wants to get good food or visit their grandkids. I look at myself and my friends. If we weren't able to drive at night and we wanted to go to dinner, this isn't a hospital trip, this is just having a life. If we wanted to go to dinner, we might just want to get together and do that and get in a bus and go into beautiful downtown Ferndale to have dinner, or one of those bazillion places in Troy, or maybe even, should I dare say, Rochester Hills. So right now people have to rely on the kindness of others to get where they need to go. People with disabilities clearly have a harder time getting where they need to go. These studies have shown that people with disabilities have twice as much harder time getting where they need to go. My friend Clark was been in his wheelchair all of his life, wanted to go to the jazz festival because he likes jazz. He's a 50-year-old guy, loves jazz, goes to the jazz festival, but he just couldn't get the bus home because he stayed longer than the bus would let him, stay. So he took his wheelchair, honest to God, 9 miles in that wheelchair to get home. And he was willing to do that because he likes jazz. And so somebody like Clark should really be able to go to a jazz festival if he wants to. And he's a young man looking for a girlfriend. He said, how am I supposed to get a girlfriend if I can't go out on Saturday night? So that's the kind of life people should be able to lead. And people have told stories, and we've been collecting stories with ACT, have been left on the side of the road. People have been left outside in sub-zero weather. They can't get over the big giant snowbank to even get to the bus. It's a huge problem. Now this is one of the young people. This is Haley. I don't know if anybody knows Haley, but Haley is one of those young people who doesn't have a car, doesn't want a car, but yet wants to have a high quality life. Now she responded to a survey in Crane's Detroit Business. 73%, which is a huge number of people, said that getting a regional transit system was their #1 wish for Southeast Michigan. We also work with a lot of college students, and students report that if they had high quality regional transit system to get to school, they could spend more time studying instead of having 2 or 3 jobs to pay for a car and to pay for expensive insurance, because insurance is pretty expensive. If I ask you who has, and when I do go to nursing homes, people say this all the time, but when I ask them, do you have grandkids or kids who live in transit-friendly cities, almost everybody raises their hand. They know somebody, a niece or nephew who lives in Chicago or Seattle or some other place. My stepson lives in Seattle with his fiance, his terminal fiance, I think. They've been a fiance forever, but they live there because they don't have to have a car. His car died, her car died, they're fine. They don't need a car. So they're staying there. When my husband's in the room, I usually say that my stepson's not coming home, and he gets them all upset, but it is true, they're not. But if we had a high-quality regional transit system, people like Ian, might even choose to stay here, get a job, raise a family, buy a home, if we had a good regional transit system, if they were done from school. So, these are our cultural institutions, and these are just a few of them. There was a new slide that had like every one we have, but we have parks, we have Easter Market, we have sporting events. We all know we have all the fields. I know that people don't take public transportation to get to Lions games because I have season tickets to the Lions, and nobody takes the bus. People who work at the stadium take the bus. But people who actually go to the stadium don't take a bus. We took it one time, got on the bus, no problem, in 11 and Woodward. I think we lost, of course, but we came out and stood around for an hour and a half waiting for the bus to come down by Grand Circus Park in the freezing rain. It was one of those nights where it was raining and the slush was up to your knees. It was miserable, and we had no idea when the bus was coming. So that's why nobody takes the bus. In those days, you could park somewhere. There was a vast sea of parking available for $10. Now, all of that parking is the Red Wings Stadium. So I don't know where the heck anybody parks to go to a Lions game. Plus, it costs $20 minimum, $30 to $40 if you want to park in an actual lot somewhere. So I don't know how anybody parks. Parking is very expensive, much less getting to parks. And the Easter Market. I was at a Presbyterian Village facility, and these women want to go to the Easter Market on Saturday. There was a variety of women up in Waterford at one of my talks they want to go to the Easter Market too. They quit driving to the Easter Market because it's so popular they can't find a place to park. So they would do anything to be able to get from Waterford to the Easter Market on Saturday morning. Now in these same surveys that have been done recently, people in Oakland County say by huge numbers that if there was a transit system that could get them from Royal Oak to, or Ferndale to the DIA, to the opera, to a restaurant, to a game that was frequent and reliable that they could count on, they would absolutely take it. Now in Oakland County, when we respond to the survey, we make it seem like we go to the DIA every weekend. They were just lining up to go there all the time. That's what people in Oakland County say. In Macomb County, they tend to want to get, they talk more about needing to get the jobs. Don't tell anybody I brought liquid. So, in terms of quality of life, communities that have good, reliable...
It's a bird indeed here at the Southfield Public Library for Science at Your Library. Lords of the Sky, Birds of Prey. The Hall Nature Room is in our meeting room at 7 p.m. and will present different types of birds of prey and talk all about their characteristics and importance to the environment. They will bring live animals including hawks, owls, falcons, and vultures that reside in the Wild Wonders Wildlife Park. Please meet us in the meeting room at 7 p.m. Families with kindergartners through 5th graders. It should be a wild time.
So yeah, public transportation to the zoo. Who doesn't think that's a great idea? So in fact, the zoo, and I haven't been to the Penguin. Have you been to the Penguin thing yet?
I did.
Oh my gosh. I know Charles went, yes.
It's phenomenal.
The zoo is totally an aside, but this is an attraction. The zoo, the Detroit Zoo, has had it in their regional, in their master plan for years that they need a reliable public transportation system, and not a fancy system on Woodward, but a system that gets people from all over the place, because they don't want to build more parking. These are already maxed out. Parking decks are not their mission. Their mission is to save animals. So they really want a regional transit system so that people can get where they need to go. And I've often thought the commercials would be so easy, you know, giraffes on buses and things. So we'll see what they end up doing with the Penguin. The documents that were created about the Penguin exhibit, they project 1.5 million people at the zoo this year, which is a lot of people. It's way more than they usually have. And they're just horrified at the thought of not having enough parking. If you go there now, it's just a mess. People parking all over Royal Oak. So anyway, communities that have good, reliable public transportation are healthier. They just are, because where there's good public transportation, people just simply walk more to get to the bus and to get where they need to go. My friend Amanda, she lives in Royal Oak, and she decided to quit taking the bus, or to quit driving. She hates driving, so now she takes the bus. And she walks 4 blocks to get to her bus, and her friends are saying, how do you get to the bus? And she said, well, I walk 4 blocks. And I'm like, wow, what a novel idea. So she gets 4 blocks of exercise that her friends don't get. So what the heck is the problem? I mean, what is the problem caused by not having a good public transit system, and the worst transit system, the worst regional transit system in the region? Well, the problem is obviously is disjointed and inadequate, but it also often doesn't cross county lines. It doesn't go from community to community, doesn't cross county lines. If you're in Macomb County, you need to go to Oakland County. It's very difficult. It's even worse if you need to go from Macomb County, Oakland County to Wayne County in order to get into the city of Detroit at any time except at the beginning of the day, and at night you have to transfer and sit around the state fairgrounds. 0 people want to do that. So we have 4 transit systems at the moment. We have the Detroit Department of Transportation, DDOT, which is improving daily, fortunately. 24-hour service now, service to Belle Isle is great. Re-examining all their routes. SMART, which is used to be, if you're of an age, you remember it, people still call it SEMTA. But it's SMART. S stands for suburban. It's suburban system. We have the People Mover, right downtown, and the Ann Arbor Area Transit Agency that called RIDE, and it's a really good transit system. And then our 5th one that we're going to be adding to the mix, does anybody know what that is? You all know what that is, right? Downtown, the M1 rail, and now it's called the Q line, which is the modern streetcar downtown, 3.3 miles that will go to Grand Boulevard. So all of those transit systems are good. All of them do what they're supposed to do. However, they're not connected and they don't work together. So that's an issue. That's a huge problem. So there's a reason that we are dead last in all of this, because of what we invest in public transportation. So a lot of the cities that people thought we were comparable to, people always talk about Chicago, of course. Chicago, we're never going to be Chicago. We're not going to build an L. But they spend in Chicago $272 per person on public transportation. Pittsburgh, which is one of the cities that people think we're comparable to, in Pittsburgh they spend $216 per person on public transportation. Cleveland, Ohio, one of the other cities that we think we're comparable to, they spend $136 per person on public transportation. We spend $67 per person on public transportation. So we've not invested in public transportation, and we're dead last, and of course that kind of investment shows. Now everybody knows who this is, even without his name up here, correct? Everybody's heard of James Robertson, the walking man. Now James Robertson, people know about him all over the world. We ran into a woman who was an intern for a couple of years, and she's been in Portugal for a couple of years studying, and she heard about James Robertson, the walking man. So he was one story 2 years ago. This is great reporting. And we say to the reporters in the room, we need more of that. But he's just one of thousands of people who can't get to work. Now he was willing to walk 21 miles to get to work every single day for 10 years to make $10 an hour. But not that many people would do that. People might walk 4 blocks to get to the bus, not a problem. But no one's going to do this. So people will either not do this, they're fully capable and want to get a job, but just simply can't walk 21 miles to get to work every single day. So people get fired all the time. We have story after story after story of people who get fired because they can't get to work, because they're late. Sometimes it's only just one day that they're late. We did a listening session with the SEIU public sector janitors, and a woman named Marquita Blanchard lives in Detroit and works in Detroit. She cleans office buildings. There's a lot of people who do this around the region, in the suburbs, in the city. But she got off of work at 1 o'clock in the morning, and Marquita could not get home. So Marquita would have to spend the money that she earned being a public sector janitor on a taxi, which is a lot of money if you're only making $15 an hour. There was a commercial, I don't know if you saw the ad on TV, but it was Katrina, and she's 34 years old, lovely young woman, been in a wheelchair all of her life. She must live, I don't know exactly where she lives, but from the commercial it looks like she lives in Rochester Hills or some really nice suburb. And she works and she goes to college, but she has a heck of a time getting where she needs to go because she lives in a community that doesn't have public transit. So she often spends $75 of her own money to get where she needs to go. Another woman we featured in one of our ads was Sabrina Simmons. She's a single mom, lives in Detroit. She's an electrical engineer, raising a teenage son, and she started to lose her sight when he was 10 years old. So she's been getting to work every single day, but she has to rely on the bus. And she tells a story about the snowbank where you get to the bus and there's a big giant snowbank, so you can't even get on the bus. She's been left out in 0-degree weather. It takes for hours for her to get where she needs to go. So Sabrina needs a better bus system. So we've also talked to cultural institutions. I had a human resources manager in one of our cultural institutions downtown, and he said he only hires people who can walk to work. Very intentional for him because he just can't be hiring and firing all the time. Hiring and firing costs money. The business community is behind transit because it hurts their bottom line to have to hire and fire all the time. We also have a lot of employers now who have the box. You check the box, it says, do you have a reliable car to get to work? And people, of course, say yes, whether they do or not, hoping that they will when the time comes. So we know that 24% of the people, at least in this region, have zero. Not only do they not have a car, but they absolutely have zero access to any car. So if I mention Livonia, Rochester Hills, Northville, Plymouth, Waterford, Wixom, Canton Township, what do all these communities have in common? They're opt-out communities. Yes, they do not participate in the smart bus system. In the most part, they didn't opt out of the system. They just never opted in. It's not required in Oakland and Wayne counties. So you think about all of the jobs that must be in Canton Township. Now, Canton Township is like a sprawl museum to me. It's got everything. It's got IKEA, it's got shopping malls, it's got industrial shops, it's got everything. Canton Township, all the jobs that must be there that people can't get to because they have zero public transportation. Same with Rochester Hills, same with Novi. Novi has a bazillion jobs. The biggest job fair in the region is held at the Suburban Showplace, which is the Cobo Hall sort of the suburbs, right? It's out there in Novi. That's where the Michigan State Fair is now. A lot of trade shows. They hold the biggest job fair in the region. 3,500 employers show up out there to get people to get new jobs. But if you don't have a car and you want a job, you can't get to the Suburban Showplace to take advantage of that. It doesn't make any sense. So this is a student, and he relies on public, Andrew. A lot of people know Andrew for some reason, but he lives in Novi, an opt-out community, and he relies on public transit to get where he needs to go. So not having a good public transit system hurts our entire economy from top to bottom in every way that you can think. We leave billions of dollars on the table, billions of dollars, not just in economic development and economic benefit, but in federal funds too. Now we all pay federal taxes. We just paid them last month. We all pay that money. That money goes to Washington, D.C., and then they disperse the money to build transit systems around the country. But since we don't have an investment, we don't invest properly in our own transit system, we don't have the kind of local match money that's required for the federal money. So our federal tax dollars, since 50 years ago, has been going to build transit systems in Cleveland, in Pittsburgh, in Chicago, in Phoenix, in Minneapolis, St. Paul has a great system. In Salt Lake City has a really great system. Los Angeles building out a wonderful system. Our federal tax dollars have gone to build their transit systems. Now we do get some back for buying buses. However, we don't get the kind of money that we really should get from the federal government. Now, all of you have gone into a city, flown into a city probably, and gotten on a transit system to get where you need to go. I know I went to Washington, D.C. recently, and I got right on the Metro and got where I needed to go. Now, Metro has its problems, but at least they have one. When people complain about Metro in Washington, D.C., I think, cry me a river. Are you kidding me? I'd love to have this thing. I mean, when you go to downtown Washington, there's not a sea of parking lots like there is in Detroit. The parking, where there's parking in Detroit, in Washington, D.C., there's buildings that pay taxes where people live and work. This is what a city should be. Now, the same Suburban Showplace, the president of the Suburban Showplace is named Blair Bowman. He's a really great guy. It's sort of a libertarian bent to him, but he makes money out of the Suburban Showplace. And he gets calls. He called me, and he came to one of our summits. He called me because they need a transit system out of Novi. They need to get transit to the Suburban Showplace. He gets people trade shows from all over the world want to come to Oakland County, to big county, want to bring their trade shows to the Suburban Showplace. They get to the part where they say, so now when we get to the airport, we bring all these people in, how do we get to the Suburban Showplace? And he says, well, you got to rent a bus or a Trailways bus or get a cab or Uber or what expensive Metro car. And so they say, well, thank you very much. I can just go to Indianapolis. I can just go to St. Paul, Minnesota, because all of those places have ways to get from the airport to the venue where they need to go. Hurts our entire economy. So our colleges and universities, these are young people walking down the street. And we have more than 30 colleges and universities in this region. That doesn't even count the private ones. We have a lot of colleges, higher education colleges and universities. All of them, you name it, whether it's Wayne State University, University of Detroit Mercy, urban, suburban, you name it, all of them underserved, completely unserved like Madonna University and Livonia, because we're opt-out community, can't get there on public transportation. So our students are relying on cars to get where they need to go. Expensive cars, they have to work in their jobs to get them, and our universities have to build parking decks. They don't want to build parking decks, but they have to. We invite international students from all over the world to come here to Metro Detroit to study. At Lawrence Tech, to be engineers, at Wayne State University, now at Oakland University, they have a medical school at Beaumont Hospital, to learn to become doctors. Honestly, they get here, these international students fly in, live on campus, and find out they have to buy a car and learn to drive. So there's this whole network of people who take these students and teach them how to drive and buy them a car. So they do that for as long as they're here, and then they leave the car to the next person who comes here. My friend who's a veteran, Michael Parker, lives in Detroit, learning to become a car mechanic. He was a homeless vet, now he lives in an apartment, now he wants to become an auto mechanic. Takes the bus to Taylor, to Wayne County Community College District 3 times a week, takes him 2.5 hours to get there, but he really wants to become a car mechanic. So we've learned that students can often take 5 to 7 years to get a 2-year education if they have to rely on public transportation to get to school, because they can't take the full range of courses that are available to them. People are isolated, they don't have the freedom to travel. 68% of senior adults say that they have poor access to public transportation. It's nearly 500,000 people who say they can't get where they need to go. Agencies get rides. I forget your name, but we were talking about paratransit. So you can call up the area agency on aging and Jewish Family Services and get rides. In fact, Jewish Family Services gets 36,000 rides for people every year, and that's just one agency. But these rides don't get them where they need to go. If you're in Oakland County and your heart specialist is at Henry Ford, Detroit, forget about it. You simply can't get there. So that's a huge problem. If you want to get groceries, and you live in Royal Oak, say, you can call Community Transit, but you have to schedule your grocery trip next week, Tuesday. Now, I shop every day. I swear to God, I go every day to the store, or every other day, and I think about people who might not have food in their house, or who need a prescription drug filled. So next week, Tuesday, is simply not good enough. So, we know that a modern, efficient public transit system will improve the quality of life for everybody. Let seniors get to school. People won't have to get hired and fired all the time if we had a good regional connected system. My friend Neil Greenberg, who DDOT had the good sense to hire, he has a transit presentation that's called Boring. This is boring. It's in Neil's world, transit is boring. Good regional transit is just there. It's not a special occasion kind of thing you take to get to the ball game. It's not something you call if you might want to get somewhere. It's something that's just there, like in a utility that you can take anytime you want to. So, what are we going to do? What's the solution to this big giant mess that I've just described? Well, the Regional Transit Authority, which is what Andy Meisner and I worked on when we were in the legislature, they finally got signed into law in 2012 after stops and stops, and they have been planning a regional transit system for the 4 counties, which will be introduced to the public in this month. This is May now. It will be introduced to the public on May 31st over at Lawrence Tech at 10 o'clock in the morning. You won't want to miss it. So once that plan is introduced, which will include bus rapid transit on Woodward Avenue, Gratiot Avenue, and Michigan Avenue from Detroit to Ann Arbor with a stop at the airport. It will also include a network of seamless rapid buses that are connected, and you can rely on them. You don't have to have a big map and figure out where you are. You just go and you stand on 12 Mile and the bus comes, which is the way it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be boring. You're not supposed to have to work to get a transit system. So that will be introduced. There'll be a 4-week comment period after that, so you can still give input into if the plan is any good or not, if it actually addresses a lot of these problems. I can tell you that it does. This is very good. And then after the comment period, the Regional Transit Authority will then adopt it, and then they will actually adopt a language, put it on the ballot, and we will all be asked to weigh in on this coming year. So it'll probably be a pretty good plan. It will also include enhanced service for seniors, and airport service. So ACT, like I said, ACT is a coalition for transit. You can go on a coalitionfortransit.com, find more information, join the coalition so that you get more information periodically. Every week or couple weeks we'll send more information to you, and you can keep updated on what's happening in the region. So I've talked enough. I'd love to find out from anybody if they have any stories they can tell or want to share about their effort trying to take public transportation. I know we already talked a little bit about your difficulties. Charles?
Well, I just...
Or do you have any questions?
Sure. Well, just to confirm, you were telling the story about people who have to pay they live so far away and they have no public transportation to get to minimum wage jobs and such. I remember many years ago, in the 90s, I managed, I was a movie theater manager, and managed the old Showcase Dearborn. And we had an employee, and this was, concession stand work.
Sure.
It was, I don't remember what the minimum wage was at the time, it was probably like $5 an hour or something. And yeah, she was taking a taxi.
Yeah.
She was taking a taxi to go to a minimum wage job. I sat down with her once, I was like, you're doing a good job, you're a good employee. I don't want to lose you, but at the same time, you're spending, money you're making is going into spending to get here to make money. So.
Happens all the time. And we have a really crummy taxi system too in this country. It's not great at all. So a lot of people take Uber, which is fine if you have enough money to take Uber.
Well,
but not everybody can get an Uber account on their phone, so I hear that all the time too. Why don't they just take Uber?
Uber has their own issues.
Well, and they have their own issues too, so everybody wants to take Uber. So between not having a good transit system, a really bad taxi system, I heard people call taxis, they never come. People are stuck in their homes. I mean, thousands and thousands of people.
I moved to Washington, D.C. After graduating from college and worked on Capitol Hill for 4 or 5 years for Congressman Levin, who represents this area. And the whole time that I was there, virtually the whole time I was there, I relied on the public transportation system. And so I would wake up, I'd walk over to the metro station, and I'd be able to bring the newspaper or whatever I was reading, and kind of get through the little turnstile with the card, and sit on the wait for the train, and the train would come, and I'd sit down, and I'd have this very relaxing, 25, 30 minutes to work, where I didn't have to worry about driving, I didn't have to worry about taking calls while driving or texting, and it was really convenient, and it took an element of stress out of my life, and delivered me to where I was working. And not only that, if I was going out with friends or whatnot, we would take the metro very often. It would run till midnight, and so if we were going to the bar or someplace where we were going to have a drink, perhaps, we didn't have to worry about drunk driving. Because we could just hop on the metro or walk, and so I found it to be a really enjoyable experience, and think that our friends in the Metro Detroit region would really like it if they would give it a chance.
I know our bar and restaurant owners in Ferndale and Royal Oak certainly would, because they run a whole network of cabs and getting people rides. I mean, it's not part of their job description, I don't think necessarily, but in terms of the economy, one DUI, which a lot of people have DUIs. One DUI is like $10,000. By the time you get an attorney, who needs that kind of stress in their life? Just to go to the bar and have a couple of drinks, not right. So taking the bus while drunk, unless you're rowdy, is not a crime.
And I just have to say as well that when I was chairman of the Commerce Committee in Lansing, and you had your bill, creating the transit system, the reason that I wanted to have a hearing in my committee, the Commerce Committee, instead of transportation, was because of the tremendous impact that mass transit has on economic development. And I know that the Association of Public Transit of America says every dollar that's invested in transit generates 4. And we're seeing, you mentioned the Q line, but you look at what's happening to the property values.
$1 billion of value they were talking about.
But the transit there is driving the increase in property values, We're in Oakland County where we lost $14 billion in property values. And so I think it's the best way to kickstart the economy.
So the reporter from Cranes told me that they, you know, in the story read, people are buying property, every single piece of property from downtown all the way through Highland Park is now under contract by somebody. Can you imagine this? Because of the public transit that they hope is going to be there. They're gambling on that. I mean, all the way through Highland Park, all the way to the Davison Expressway, all that property is under contract to somebody, which is, I've never even heard of that 10 years ago. That's just crazy.
Well, I lived in Southfield, Michigan for over 20-something years, but I'm originally from Chicago. And I depended from elementary school on this good old CTA. We called it the green limousine. You know? But it would take me, I would transfer almost seamlessly to my schools, my elementary school, all the way up to high school. And it's very, and even from the airport, I was working for United Airlines until I was laid off. Unfortunately, they
Sure.
don't have a presence here now, but I would fly to my hometown, but this is my home too now, after 20-something years, to Chicago from O'Hare, and then transfer, and I'm right where I need to be to see my mom and my grandmother, and you know, we talk about a sustainable future. From a sustainability standpoint, this global warming and all of that, it's a good choice versus all of these cars polluting our environment, the economy, which you talk about, you know, for every dollar, you know, the economy can get, you know, $4. So
It's part of our testimonial team.
But, you know, I wonder, you know, like right now I have a little beater, and I'm like, oh man, if I, you know, try to get a job, and, you know, what am I gonna do? And I myself will maybe on that little application, when they say, oh, do you have a reliable transportation? Yeah, I'm checking the yes, like, okay, now I'm gonna have to go to Enterprise rental cars.
Yeah, right.
Just, you know, for the first few months or something.
Well, now,
and, you know what?
when you were talking about going to school, a lot of our, especially in the city, Detroit, a lot of students rely on public transit. I mean, like really, a lot of students. Charter schools, of which there are many in the city of Detroit, don't come with buses. So they completely rely on public transportation to get their kids to school. I was at a listening session in Detroit, and some families send their kids to 4 and 5 different schools in all different parts of the city, and they spend like 3 hours getting their kids to school safely. Just in Royal Oak, where I live, we did away with busing years ago for financial reasons. A lot of communities did. Don't have any school buses at all. And so now our superintendent is talking to the smart bus system, saying, hey, we need buses. Our kids need to get to the high school on a bus. So it's not, you know, it's just a need for everybody. School kids rely on public transportation all over the place.
I was curious, assuming it goes through and it's successful, and you know, obviously it's going to increase the amount of people being, you know, transported. Have there been any studies on the anticipated reduction in traffic on the road systems? Because it occurs to me that there's a strong connection between, you know, our crappy roads, you know.
Well, yeah.
And,
you know, and that's probably a question for the Regional Transit Authority, but I do see all the time on the internet, you know, stories about traffic congestion and transit and all that. You know, it's not a cure for congestion.
no, but it certainly would.
But it gets people off the road.
If you reduce,
Yeah.
you know, if you reduce the number of cars
on
a given road by,
Yeah.
you know,
But you
20% or something, that also reduces the amount of wear and tear.
But you can't sell it as a traffic reducer because you find out that it doesn't, you know, it's not like, oh my God, the expressway is empty now because everybody's taking transit. But to get, you know, to get me and you off the road, who doesn't want to do that? I'm sure you're a good driver. I would be happy to not be on the road. I hate expressways. I take mile roads is my thing, except for when I went to Lansing. I think I got over expressways, driving to Lansing every day.
Thanks, Marie. I just wanted to ask, as far as when you mentioned young people and all the different variables that it affects as far as them gaining employment, livability here, not being people focused. When you talk to different segments, do you see how maybe it affects maybe young men versus young women, maybe young African American men, some of the problems that we have in our society that we might label
Sure.
their problems are issues because of the system actually right here that has
One of the-
distinct stories.
One of the most vulnerable populations in the country, of course, is here is young men. And I was just at an event on Friday night with a woman from, I forget the law firm, but she's in the juvenile law group. And that's what she does all the time, is deal with young men trying to stay out of jail and get a job. And so if they had jobs, and could get to a job, then they probably wouldn't think about crime as a way to make a living.
Or I have one that had jobs and was going to school from Oakland Community College at the border of Farmington Hills to Somerset Mall, because the bus does go to Somerset
Well,
Mall.
yeah, but-
That would take him 2.5 to 3 hours
Well,
some
sure.
days to get back
It's
from work.
ridiculous.
But not just that, coming home at night, walking around, people looking at him like, why is he walking here? You know, having to make sure that we could get to the bus stop so he wouldn't stick out like a sore thumb. So all of those issues
I
as
see
well.
another testimonial in my future.
Oh, right here. Well, they're here to speak. And then my nephew at Wayne State here, he has a solution that I'd like to.
I think I heard a little bit about your solution. You thought she's pointing at you?
Yes.
My name's Kyle Bartel. I actually started following you guys on Facebook the other day.
Oh, good.
But I started an organization called Sit On in Detroit.
Oh, yeah, sure, yeah.
So, I mean, my idea is, you know, with the crappy buses, well, I'm not gonna say crappy buses.
You can say
that we
crappy.
have in
Or
Detroit.
yeah, too late.
But, I saw the need to provide an outlet for people who are waiting, and we spend a lot of time waiting. I caught the bus growing up, going to high school. When I transferred out to Southfield, when I lived with my aunt, I was kind of just mesmerized by the fact that like there's a yellow cheese bus going to pick me up and take me to school. You know, so that was just kind of something that I appreciated.
Does look like yellow cheese.
And
Bad
so,
cheese.
Yeah, I mean, but it was something that, you know, looking back on, I was always wondering why, you know, because catching public transportation wasn't always something that was enjoyable. So the reason why I started this project was to, you know, provide people with some type of outlet to kind of take their minds off of, you know, the bus being late. So I build benches out of recyclable.
You're that guy.
Yeah.
Out of books, right?
So we build all the benches that we build are made out of recycled lumber, and we stock them with books that are donated to us. So it's
Didn't you get in trouble about that first?
D-Dot got a little pissed off at first. I mean, they kind of felt, I mean, it was just, you know, stuff kind of went viral. I didn't tell my parents I was doing this project.
That is so great.
You know, we kind of sought to, you know, the worst thing that's going to happen is somebody's going to have somewhere to sit. Because I would notice that there's like, you drive around Detroit, you're going to see trash cans turned over sideways.
Right.
You're going to see crates. You're going to see makeshift like things that are in the, like that are, you know, out in the public that show you know people they're waiting a while, so they're going to make some type of seat. So that's kind of my feasibility study, I guess, for when I'm you know, installing these benches. And so. So things were a little rough at first, but you know I was able to work with the city and actually get like a letter.
How many have you made
now? We're at about 60 right now.
Wow.
Wow.
That is so great. And they're all still there? It's all.
For the most part, most of them, a couple of them have gotten lifted. I don't know where they're at. Probably somebody's backyard.
Probably someone's backyard, yeah.
You know,
I can see one of those in my garden.
They can be wherever, but I guess more so you know, as far as just, you know, I guess it's one thing to have a plan. You know, sometimes I get a little impatient, and I think it's just time to, you know, to act. You know, as
well, it won't be long now. Yeah.
Right. So I mean, I do see some progress in, you know, Detroit with this, you know, admin services and, you know, us bringing attention to it. You know, even like with us, you know, building these benches, you know, we've been fortunate to get a lot of publicity from it, but also too, people kind of see and bring attention to an issue. So
yeah, everything you can do to bring attention to the issues is, because I saw an article. I saw an article yesterday about the county executives and the mayor talking about regional transit, and it was just kind of, you know, blah, blah, blah. The same thing they always say. And what we need are actual real stories from real people talking about why public transit is important to them. And so everything that you do that calls attention to it, that's not like some, you know, county executive saying something that's really, really important. All of your stories are really important. So if we haven't taken your name, but we have your name, then if you signed up in the back, so we can call you. Did you were going to say something too, I thought, Commissioner?
You know, I was going to chime in briefly, and more so my commentary relates to retention of talent within Oakland County and really within the state overall. I'd like to speak more so from a personal perspective. You know, just as, and, well, yeah, I'll call it a person, but our county treasurer had denoted, having experiences in education, you know, throughout the nation and in different areas, you have the ability to get exposed to regional transportation and what the ability of providing independence can yield for an individual, not just in terms of gaining employment, but independence for that person. And just specifically with the event today, you know, I posted this event numerous times and spread it as wide and far as I could. And I actually wanted to read just one of the posts that I had received in terms of responses. I promised I would do this. And this is from Ted Tangen. He's a student at Oakland University, got networked with pretty reasonably. And he notes, this sounds like an excellent event. Wish I could attend. But taking 2 buses to get over there, and then another 2 buses to get where I need to go after that meeting would be too much for me. I do like seeing the increased interest in improving our transit system. I look forward to the future commitments. So this is just
we'll be in touch with you to get that.
I will definitely pass that information along,
Sure.
but ultimately it's just kind of a microcosm of what's taking place, you know, throughout our state. We have viable, interested, energetic individuals, youth that want to be involved and be a piece and parcel of what it is we're building, but ultimately we have a Swiss cheese kind of approach to our transportation. So, yeah. So that's just one of them.
So, I mean, a couple of things. When you were in DC, I mean, I know a lot of staffers don't make a lot of money, right? Getting, they just don't. Being able to take that, gives the opportunity to be able to take a low-wage job and be at Capitol Hill. Who doesn't want to do that? Pontiac, the bus rapid transit will go to Pontiac. I mean, this is like gold. Absolutely. To connect to Pontiac. Honestly, it would be so great to be able to go to Pontiac and back. There was something else I was going to say. Oakland University has been a little. They came to our summits, but they've been a little hesitant getting on board of ACT. You know, they're just no one's ever really talked to them about public transit. When they first started coming to our events, they talked about how they had one smart bus. Oakland University is in Rochester Hills, right? They had one smart bus that came in the morning and dropped off 13 people. This is it. Out of all the people that go to Oakland University now live on campus, they just had given up trying to get a good transit system out of Oakland University, so they just built more parking decks. But now they brought more students in to live on campus, not to mention the international students. So now they joined ACT, which is very good. So most of our colleges and universities are, Macomb Community College has a real problem with their students being able to get to school. OCC, like I said, Dr. Steve Reif, who's the president of the Royal Oak and Southfield campuses of OCC, says that it really does take his students 5 to 7 years to get a 2-year degree because they simply can't get from one campus to the other. If they have to rely on transit, they can only take a couple classes a day. They also have to work if they're trying to buy a car, so it's just a mess.
Yeah, no, I was going to kind of expand on the commissioner's point, talking about, you know, what it takes to get from Pontiac to Southfield, which should be a direct, you know, 15-minute shot, and, you know, you have to take 2 buses here and there. When I was working in 2008 on Brenda Lawrence's long shot, but, you know, underdog campaign to take out Brooks Patterson.
Those days.
In those days, you know, one of the main frameworks of her campaign was talking about a regional mass transit system that connected everybody. And if there's one person that's impeded the progress of that, it's Brooks Patterson. And I'll say it. So somebody needs to take him out, you know, in the future. But one of the things that we showed is that if you plugged into Google, point A and point B, where you want it to go, you have different options. You can say, I'm going to drive there, I'm going to take mass transit, or I'm going to walk. There are so many instances that walking takes shorter than plugging in mass transit as an option. It would take you a long time to walk, but it would take you a longer time to hop on this bus, and this bus to get there. And that, I think, is so indicative of how broken the current system is. And I always tell this story too. About 5 years ago, I had a friend in my age bracket, millennial, who lived in Lansing, and she took a job interview in Southfield, and she took a job interview in Washington, D.C. Now, from a practical standpoint, moving her life from Lansing to Southfield would have been the easier option. But she took the job in D.C. because part of the reason why she took the job is she didn't have to take a car with her, and that all the expenses that entails. And when her job in D.C. sends her to Baltimore or to Maryland, they rent a car for her, and that's the new economy. That's the direction that most employers are taking, and we're totally missing that because you have to have a car in order to do anything here, and including keeping your employment.
Yeah, we did a town hall meeting back in 2009 or something, a transit town hall meeting in Canton Township. Sprawling universe, it's got everything. But the people that came to our town hall meeting were not aware they didn't have public transit. It just never occurred to them that they never saw a bus on Ford Road. Once I told them, they're like, oh, I'm like, why is that? Because your leaders didn't want you to vote on it. But we had a woman in the audience who was deciding where her kid was going to go to school, and so they do the thing where they do a lot of research, and so he was never going to apply to Wayne State, even though it seemed like the local university. But from Canton Township to Wayne State University, there's no way to get there on a bus. No way to get there on a bus. So he was going to go to Western because they were totally connected by a train. Kalamazoo to Western Michigan University. For her, that was the better choice, to send her kid to Kalamazoo. Doesn't make any sense. But I took the train all the time from Western.
A lot of the comparisons that you talked about today are mature communities that have a mature, when I say a mature community, they have a mature transit system that, and one example is, you never rode a car from the time you were young. You rode the train or an L or whatever. And that's the experience that people have in Denver, in Washington, D.C., Chicago. They just don't drive cars for the most part. In Detroit, the perception is, and I'm going to ask you, how do you overcome the perception of the only people that ride buses are poor people? Because the majority of the people or I should say a lot of people in this area build cars, and why would I work at a factory where I build a car and ride a bus to work? That doesn't fit, and you don't have that same conflict in the communities that you've used as examples. Even in Seattle, Washington, they have big manufacturing for airplanes. You don't pick an airplane.
So when Denver had a bus system, but Denver wasn't known as a transit-friendly city back in the day, but they have a really great transit system now. Los Angeles has one of the best transit systems in the country. They build a transit, I mean, they're more car-centered than we are. They built Los Angeles so that you could drive. They built the transit system, including the subway they're building now, in 30 years. They built it in 30 years from nothing, from zero. There's some buses that Johnny Carson used to do, I'm dating myself, but Johnny Carson used to do jokes about the bus in Pasadena, but they have a great transit system now. They built it from nothing.
But
it's a matter of
they aren't fighting the auto industry. They aren't building cars.
We're not fighting the auto industry either. The auto industry is all behind public transit.
But it's the perception of the people that have lived here and lived here and lived. It may be the greatest thing on earth until you overcome the perception that the people that ride buses are poor people.
And that's why we're doing these presentations, and that's why we need everybody here who knows better to get involved and to tell stories and to tell their families and their friends and neighbors and to have a presentation at their church or their congregation or their young Democrats or whatever. So
I'd like to ask a question. How many people in this room in the last 6 months have ridden on a bus?
How many people in this room want to ride on a bus? See, there you go, everybody. Everybody in the room, and everywhere that I go, people say they want to ride a public transit system. They don't want to drive. They don't want to drive to the ball game. I have a group of women who are living in the Presbyterian Village in 15 Mile in Clinton Township. They want to go to the ball game. These are 65-year-old women. But they can't go to the ball game. They have zero way to get there. But if the 5 of them could go, they would be happy to go to a ball game if they could just get there on a bus.
I understand that, and I'm getting to the age where I'm
Sure.
to the point where I may or may not outlive my ability to drive.
God
And it would
willing.
be nice to have a bus
Sure.
system, but it has to be a bus system that works. And for
Absolutely.
the last 50 years, we haven't had a bus system that works. And again, that fits into the perception of what kind of a bus system we have.
Yeah.
I've said, kind of with tongue in cheek, that if I didn't have a car, I'd risk going to jail and steal a car to drive rather than wait for a bus.
Oh, absolutely. Everybody
So-
would. I mean, it's true. That's why people don't get jobs because they can't get there. And so part of the, part of the chore, is to tell the stories of people who can't get to work, people who want to take transit but can't take transit. I mean, it isn't everybody who's poor, and I think people actually intuitively understand that. The guy out in Romeo didn't last week, but that's a whole other story. So I think we'll find out. It's a matter of telling the story. Yes, ma'am.
Maria, I'm Joy Francis. I apologize to everybody because I drove since I was 16 years old. I am legally blind. I have been since birth. My philosophy, once I found out when I was 35 years old that I had been blind since birth but had been driving. The state of Michigan was stupid enough to give me a driver's license. I was stupid enough to drive.
Wow.
And I drove only because there was no public transportation. I could not get to jobs or to what I was attempting to do without driving. And that's frightening. The other cue when you asked who rode a bus with me last Thursday, I took a bus. I had an Uber driver take me to a doctor's appointment over here on 12 Mile. I then walked and took the bus home. I finished with the doctor's appointment. I was needing to get from 12 Mile down to Telegraph. I was going to get the 12 Mile bus. I decided I'm going to attempt to walk this. I walked from the doctor's office down to Telegraph and got there at the exact same time the bus got there. I was at Evergreen and 12 Mile. And that's the sad part of waiting for the bus.
You're also lucky there were sidewalks. There's a lot of places where you can.
Well, yeah, and I was scared to death because I had no idea where I was going, and I'm going, oh, yeah, here, and it took me here, there, and around and about. Unfortunately, I love to walk, and I now have there's an MS medication that allows me to walk, so God bless, I can walk.
So
That's scary.
So Bloomfield Hills is an opt-out community. Where Charlie, you live in Bloomfield Hills, don't you? Yeah. The opt-out community.
Yeah.
So if you take the bus up Woodward, and then you have to get off. If you want to get off in Bloomfield Hills, you have to get off the bus at 16 Mile and walk, or get off the bus at Long Lake or Hickory Grove or one of those, and walk back. And so you think it's not a big deal, except there is actually a giant nursing facility there that's owned by Beaumont Hospital, where everybody goes. If you have neck surgery or hip surgery or something, stroke, you go from the hospital right to that place. And the people who work there take the bus, but there's no sidewalk. So they get out of the bus at 16 Mile and walk in the street on Woodward Avenue, day and night, winter, summer, to get to work.
And I could just, as a resident of Bloomfield Township, there's also these, you're talking sort of about the safety factor. Just last weekend, there was an event at Tobo Hall that I attended. You know, I ended up driving, but it was, you know, it was a rainy, the roads were slick, it was yucky weather, it was raining, I was running late, so, you know, so I had to drive from around, you know, Lobster Long Lake, you know, downtown. I would, as a resident of one of the, you know, wealthier communities in Oakland County, I would have loved to have been able to hop on a rapid, you know, clean, you know, simple bus, just shoot me downtown to Cobo Hall, then, you know, come right back up. So, you know, how much gasoline are you using? How many accidents are you risking? How many potholes are you?
Paid to park too.
You got to pay for the parking as well, and so forth. So yeah, I can say that there are a lot of people, even in the Birmingham Bloomfield area, who would absolutely love to have.
Absolutely. We've done a lot of listening sessions in Bloomfield Hills with people who absolutely would take a public transit bus if it was reliable and frequent and safe.
And I also know that there are people, even in the Bloomfield area, there are people who have to walk a couple of miles to get somewhere that they would much, you know, they don't have access to a car. And you know, it's not as high percentage-wise, but there are still a lot of people.
So we'll see what the plan holds. I mean, the plan is got to be seamless, safe, connected, and reliable. And so part of the plan then also, which I didn't say, but is to have parking ride lots, so you can park in your car and go somewhere, and bus shelters, so no more standing by a pole on the side of the road in the rain. No more of that. Bus shelters. I mean, I drive by those people standing in the pole on the side of the road and just, you know, praise God, it's not me. But. So anyway, thank you all for being the best audience ever. I mean, like ever.
Greg, do you have a question in the way?
Oh.
I saw your hand up.
Yeah. I was just wondering, one of the biggest challenges for mass transit are the opt-out communities. I was wondering, what would you tell them tell their leaders in that moment where they have to make a decision about, do they spend, you know, tens of thousands of dollars to opt into SMART, or do they not?
So if I get your question, but so for the Regional Transit Authority, the opt-out situation ends. There is no opt-out in the Regional Transit Authority legislation. So everybody in the 4.3, everybody in the 4-county region, 4.3 million people will be, there's either in or we're all out. So that's the situation.
You had one other question there.
That was the answer to your question.
So going back to the rail station, is all the bus tokens going to be the same, or is it going to be different fares?
That I don't know. That's a Regional Transit Authority question. You can ask them on May 31st over here at Lawrence Tech when they introduce the plan. I know they're talking. There's a the standard bus fare. I assume there'll be a standard. There'll be a student fare.
There's supposed to be a compatible card.
I'm sorry, what?
They're talking about a card that would be compatible between the different.
Yeah, you would use it from system to system, and it would just be one fare card. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Yeah, single fare card, sure.
So I work for Community Network. Most people
Sure.
give out bus tickets.
Yes.
They don't work in other counties except Oakland County.
Right.
So when getting a bus certificate in Detroit,
Yes.
it's impossible.
Yes.
Unless you have money.
Well, there's a whole, there's the homeless coalitions, really need to be able to get free bus passes for people too, which is a whole other consideration, but yes.
Well,
huge.
around the homeless, we have a task force, transportation task force.
The one that meets in Oakland County?
Yeah.
Yeah, I go to that from time to time, sure.
And so we were trying to, because a lot of my clients have to take 2 or 3 different buses in Pontiac to go to all the doctors and stuff.
Well, there was one story told out there, they were trying to teach people how to use transit. There's a whole network of people who teach people how to take transit, and they're stuck out in the middle of North Macomb County forever, had to call a cab. So yeah, we can do a lot better for our citizens. So yeah, there'll be a single fare card.
I just want to say one thing before you wrap up. I want to thank you, Marie, for coming, but also to thank all the other elected officials that came, because they represent every level of county government, city government, county government, state government. So it just proves the point that we all need and want to learn about this and want our constituents to know that we care about this whole effort and the ballot initiative.
Well,
coming up.
and I, yeah,
Thank
just-
you.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Great.
Coalition for Transit. Oh, and I did have flyers, but I don't have them.
Thank you.